I want to first start by thanking all of you for being here, but I also want to thank you for something else, and that is changing the legislature. When I got here, I don't know if you remember, 4 years ago, there was such hostility to anything environmental, even just sort of looking to see what the fracking industry was doing. You would have thought that I was a pariah, but I'll never forget the standing ovation I got among environmentalists that very first session. And I'm so grateful because you really were the wind beneath my wings in pursuing environmental work. And now, 4 years later, things have changed. Now people are asking us to sign on to the Green Amendment. Now people have different bills. There are so many more environmental bills than there were 4 years ago. And it's because they know they are hearing you. The legislature, we are hearing you, and we are hearing what's important. And that brings me to the Green Amendment. The Green Amendment is an opportunity for you to express your voice, because once the legislature passes it, it will be on the ballot, and then you will be able to vote for it. And I just know, just the polls that they're doing about other environmental things, the polls we're seeing, I know it's going to win handily if we can get it to the ballot box. And I feel really positive about it. This year, I don't know if you remember last year, we got 3 appointments, 3 committee, during a 30-day session, we got 3 committee assignments. So you knew there was a message, right? This year, in the 60-day, we only got 2 committee assignments. And that's really good. Really, really good. Now we'll talk about, some of the opposition, I know during this session, and the misinformation and the exaggerations that we're getting from the other side, but that just shows they're really scared. And I also want you to think about, if there is an industry coming here and they purport to be environmentally friendly, but then they're opposing the Green Amendment. They don't want to be in a state that values its air, land, and water in a healthy environment. What does that mean? What are they thinking about? What are they afraid of? What are they concerned about? And look for the money. Look for the money. And so you will see some of that, and I know you're going to talk about it. And working with Maya and other people, other lawyers, the Environmental Law Center, we've really debunked a lot of the things they're saying. But the positive things about the Green Amendment is what we need to focus on. The transformation that it will complete in our legislature, from people who are concerned about what any kind of environmental legislation will do to economic development, to people who are swearing, when they swear to uphold the Constitution, to protect our environment and to protect our air, land, and water. That is just going to be so inspiring when we have that happen. And I can hardly wait, when I take the oath of office, to absolutely swear to protect our air, land, water, and a healthy environment for this generation and future generations. So thank you for coming. It is an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the session. Maya?
Yes, thank you so much, Senator. That's so such positive empowerment for all of us. It's so wonderful to have you, and to really have you continue as our legislative champion on this important transformational change. With you and Representative Ferrari in the lead, we can't lose, and all these amazing activists. So thank you so very much.
Well, and remember, it's the activists. It's the activists.
That's right. This is
going to put us over the top.
Yeah. The document, the Constitution, is a document of, by, for the people. And so that is how we will make change, with the people. I am going to share a PowerPoint. This is just a reminder of our beautiful New Mexico landscapes and communities we're working to protect. Here's our agenda for this evening. We've already had this wonderful welcome from Senator Cedillo Lopez, who continues as our legislative champion on the Senate side for the New Mexico Green Amendment. Thank you so much, Senator. Our agenda is going to proceed. I'm going to do a reminder update, and we're going to take on some of the talking points from the challengers. We're then going to transition to Nicole Alanovich, who's going to talk with us about the importance of personal stories when you're engaged in activism around the Green Amendment. Then Eddie Estrada is going to take the stage, and he's going to talk with us about ways to engage. And then we're going to have Bridget Brady, who's going to talk about some new ways that you can engage in an ongoing way in advancing the New Mexico Green Amendment movement, as well as a mini grants program we have to support those in need of additional support to perhaps help them be able to take that step of real strong active engagement. Before we dive into the agenda, I really do want to invite people to put in the chat their names, any organizational affiliation they are with, and the Native American lands from which you are joining our meeting. For me, I am tonight on the lands of the Tiwa people, but I have come from the lands of the Lenni Lenape on the East Coast. So I'm in Santa Fe right now, but I have come from the lands of the Lenni Lenape, where day in and day out, I work with the First Peoples to protect the Delaware River and the Delaware River watershed. And so I'm really, truly honored to be here with you all. For those of you who don't know me, I think most people know me, right? In addition to being the Delaware Riverkeeper for the last 30 years, I'm the founder of the National Green Amendments for the Generations movement and wrote a couple of books on the topic. So I have some information to share, and I'm honored to be a partner in the New Mexico Coalition to advance the New Mexico Green Amendment. And this is a really powerful and growing coalition of organizations and activists from across New Mexico who are coming together to advance this transformational change for environmental protection, environmental entitlements, and ensuring that we provide equitable protection for all communities across New Mexico and across the generations. So thank you to all the organizations who have already signed on in support of the New Mexico Green Amendment movement this year. And if you haven't yet, we hope you will join us, and there'll be information on how you can do that as part of the presentation. But I just want to remind people what the New Mexico Green Amendment is, what it actually says. This year, it is going forth as House Joint Resolution number 4 on the House side and Senate Joint Resolution number 6 on the Senate side. So, of course, if you go on the nmlegis.com website, look up want to look up the Green Amendment, these are the numbers you use, HJR 4 and SJR 6. This is actually what the New Mexico Green Amendment going forward this year says. And I think it really would help us all to take a moment to look at the language together. It says that it is proposed to amend Article 2, that's the Bill of Rights section, of the Constitution of New Mexico by adding a new section to read, "The people of the state shall be entitled to clean and healthy air, water, soil, and environments, a stable climate and self-sustaining ecosystems for the benefit of public health, safety, and general welfare. The state shall protect these rights equitably for all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, tribal membership status, socioeconomics, gender, or geography. The state, counties, and municipalities shall serve as trustee of the natural resources of New Mexico and shall conserve, protect, and maintain these resources for the benefit of all the people, including present and future generations. The provisions of this section are self-executing. Monetary damages shall not be awarded for a violation of this section. The section is enforceable against the state, counties, and municipalities. And it is proposed also to amend Article 20 of the Constitution by removing Section 21. That's under the line, so I can't read it exactly, but by removing Article 20, Section 21 of the Constitution in order to ensure clarity that we are really lifting up environmental rights to this highest constitutional status. Over the course of the last legislative session, I am going forth, we, with the input of other legislators and activists, Senator Cedillo Lopez and Representative Ferrari, along with the other sponsors of the amendment, identified some key modifications that would really help enhance the power and the strength and the clarity of the amendment. And so I just want to highlight some of these key modifications. The first is, while we all know from trainings from last year that the Green Amendment as previously written would really lift up and empower environmental justice protection, ensuring equitable protection for all communities by all government officials across New Mexico, the senator and the representative and the other sponsors really wanted to make absolutely clear, so we didn't have to understand how the amendment worked to understand the environmental justice empowerment that it provides. And so they said, you know what, let's put that language, that empowerment, that clarity right in the language of the Constitution. And so you will see that is why we have added this language highlighted in green, that the state shall protect these rights equitably for all people, regardless, again, of race, ethnicity, tribal membership status, socioeconomics, gender, or geography. That adds really critical clarity. So there can be no question about the environmental and justice empowerment of the New Mexico Green Amendment. You'll notice that we focus on the term equity versus equality, because it really makes a difference. If we just sort of equally go forth and empower people in the same way, we actually can perpetuate the inequities, the inequalities in terms of environmental protection and environmental burdens moving forward. So it's important that we understand that there are some communities that have been burdened historically here in New Mexico that need an extra lift in order to be able to access their constitutional right to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. And so focusing on the term equity ensures that we really are lifting everybody up to bring them to that same place and entitlement of environmental rights. And we're not just sort of lifting all boats, but in equal fashion, and in so doing, actually perpetuating the inequities of the past. So that's why that equity language is so critical. The amendment is also clarified to make clear that the trustee obligations and the enforcement that you'll see in Section C applies to states and counties and municipalities. And this is really to address the clarity of who it is that this amendment applies to, that it applies to these government officials at these various layers of government, from municipalities to counties to the state, and that we are not actually impacting, for example, the Osechi Association, those in positions that the amendment actually was not intended to reach or to impact. And so this language was offered as clarifying language. We also have made clear that the amendment is not about monetary payouts to address environmental problems that rise to the constitutional level. We don't want people who are facing environmental impacts that rise to that constitutional level to simply be placated with a money payout. We want the constitutional violation to be remedied. And so this language makes sure that there's absolutely clarity that when a remedy is required, because there has been a constitutional violation, the remedy is going to be about removing the constitutional injustice for everybody, not simply allowing a money payout to a few. And this language, it was always intended that the New Mexico Green Amendment, like green amendments that are in place in other states or advancing in other states, were always to be focused on addressing the constitutional violation for everybody, not to be able to be, again, be satisfied by simply money payouts. That was always the intent. But the Civil Rights Act that was passed last year in the New Mexico legislature made it important to offer this clarity in the language. So we're not actually changing the original intent. We're just offering this critical clarification for how the amendment will be enforced. So in what does having a New Mexico Green Amendment do? And if you've been to previous trainings, you'll know that there's a lot more detail on this, but for tonight's training, super broad strokes. What the New Mexico Green Amendment does is it lifts up the right of all New Mexicans, including future generations, to a clean and healthy environment, including water, air, soils, ecosystems, environment, and a stable climate. So they are given the same highest constitutional standing recognition and protection as we give to those other fundamental rights we hold dear. As we all know how powerfully the right to free speech, the right to freedom of religion, how powerfully the right to bear arms are protected because they're given Bill of Rights recognition and protection in the New Mexico Constitution, and also in the federal Constitution. Well, now that same incredible power will come to bear for the environment and environmental rights. And quite simply, just cutting right through it all, that's what the New Mexico Green Amendment is going to accomplish. So what's the anticipated process for the New Mexico Green Amendment? In the last couple of days, as the senator has commented on, we actually know what the committee assignments are on the Senate side and on the House side. On the Senate side, it's going to be the Rules Committee and the Judiciary Committee. And as the senator said, this is really powerful progress. Last year in the 30-day legislative session, there were 3 committee assignments, which was an incredibly high hurdle for a 30-day legislative session. But this year, in their wisdom, the Senate has recognized that having review by the Rules Committee and the Judiciary Committee is perfectly appropriate and will provide for a robust hearing and analysis process by the Senate side of the legislature. And so they have once again focused on those 2 committees. On the House side, I think it was just yesterday, we received the committee assignments, and once again, the New Mexico Green Amendment is going to go before the House Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee and the House Judiciary Committee. Of course, our New Mexico Green Amendment Coalition is going to be working individually and collectively to make sure you all know when there are opportunities to be heard formally in a hearing process, but we certainly encourage you to note these committee assignments for yourself so that you can also keep track of when the Green Amendment might be coming forth. And maybe if you learn something before the rest of us do, you can alert all of us when there might be a hearing that's about to happen. And now I just quickly but not too quickly, but I do want to go through some of the frequently asked questions, really often framed as challenges that we hear to the New Mexico Green Amendment. There's nothing new or scary in what we hear. Frankly, these are the same kinds of challenges we hear in other states, and most of them are based on bluster, because who can be opposed to the people having a right to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments? There really is no real or rational reason to be opposed to this critical protection for an inalienable human right that we all know belongs to all of us. But nonetheless, it's important to understand what these questions and challenges are that are brought forth and how we might respond to them. So one of the first questions is, does it really have to be in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution? Can't we just have language anywhere in the Constitution that talks about environmental rights? And quite simply, the answer is no. Placement in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution brings critical guidance to all elements of the government about how the amendment must be interpreted, how it must be applied in order to meet constitutional muster. And if there is a legal challenge, how the courts should take a look at the potential legal challenge that has been brought to bear. So Bill of Rights placement brings critical legal and substantive guidance that is essential for ensuring that environmental rights are given appropriate highest constitutional standing recognition and protection. And really, I think the easiest way to think about it and to remember it is the Bill of Rights section is where, in fact, we place all those other human, civil, and political rights we hold dear, like the right to free speech and freedom of religion. If we want to lift up environmental rights so they have that same highest constitutional and legal standing recognition and protection as those other fundamental freedoms, then we have to place our environmental rights in the same section of the Constitution. It's as simple as that. And so hopefully you can all just remember that. right? We want them all to be on the same playing field. So we often hear the assertion that the language in the Green Amendment is too broad. What does clean mean? What does healthy mean? What is clean water? What is a stable climate? And I just want to assure you that the language in the New Mexico Green Amendment is appropriately broad. It's appropriately broad so it can provide that overarching guidance to all government action and activities that involve the environment and can endure through time and cover even those issues, those emerging toxins and dangerous contaminants and harmful environmental practices that we can't even conceive of in the present. Using that broad language ensures that we can cover all scenarios across space and time, and that's really critical. So that's one reason for the broad language. And the other thing is that all fundamental freedoms use this same kind of broad language for this very same purpose, to provide that overarching guidance that covers all aspects of the fundamental right and that can endure through time. And so there's no reason to treat our environmental rights different than those other essential freedoms. And so one way to think about it, right, is to look at the language that we see in other New Mexico Bill of Rights provisions. We see similar broad language for this very same purpose. We see a prohibition on excessive bills or fines. What's excessive means? What excessive means to excessive may mean one thing to one person and another thing to another person, but over time, it has been, its interpretation and application and definition has been defined by government action, including with assistance from the judiciary. Just compensation for property takings, that's broad language. The right to freely speak, the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, the right to be free to worship. These are all broad terms that require additional definition to have clarity and understanding. And these are terms that are very similar to the kinds of terms that we use in the New Mexico Green Amendment. So the language and the choice of terminology is appropriately broad in the New Mexico Green Amendment, just as it is appropriately broad when we are protecting these other fundamental freedoms that all New Mexicans hold dear and want protected and have secured protection for in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. We then the next piece is, well, how will these terms be defined? Clean and healthy air, water, soils, etc. How will they be defined? They will be defined through the same process that those other terms in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution are defined by. First, there'll be efforts at definition through the legislative and the executive branches. They'll pass laws, they'll issue regulations, they'll issue permits, right, that are intended to fulfill the obligation of government officials to protect the environmental rights of all the people of New Mexico. And when they get it right, great. We will all sit back and be happy that they got it right and ensured environmental rights were protected. But when a community believes that they have been burdened, perhaps burdened disproportionately or overburdened by the ramifications of this government action, then they will be entitled to bring a legal challenge in the courts. And then the judiciary will appropriately come into the process and help consider, refine, and define whether or not the interpretation by the other branches of government was appropriate. That's the way it happens for those other Bill of Rights provisions. That's the way it will happen for the Green Amendment. We want environmental rights to be treated in the same way we protect these other fundamental, or we treat these other fundamental rights. This is same treatment. When the justices do have to come into the process to review and consider government action to determine whether or not there's been a constitutional violation, they will do what judges do. They will use standard principles of legal interpretation and constitutional law to determine whether or not there's been a violation. The trustee language that's actually been included in the New Mexico Green Amendment, just that piece of the amendment brings critical additional guidance on what the amendment means and for government officials when they are interpreting and applying and protecting environmental rights. When it is appropriate and government officials can show that they have engaged in informed decision-making and that they really have fulfilled the constitutional obligations and criteria, the courts will appropriately defer. And if the courts find that there has been a constitutional violation, the courts are not going to put themselves into the shoes of the legislature or the agencies and say, okay, you got it wrong. Now we're going to put out the law of the land for New Mexico. Here's the appropriate interpretation. No, what the justices will do is what justices do. They will say there has been an unconstitutional violation here, legislature, regulatory agency. It is now incumbent on you to go find, prepare, and advance the appropriate solution to bring this situation into compliance with the Constitution. So the judges are not going to be looking to displace any other arm of government. They're going to be looking to do what judges do, interpret whether or not there has been compliance with the Constitution and whether or not additional action or activity by other arms of government is necessary to remedy a violation if it's been identified. Justices in Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York, the other Green Amendment states, have been very effectively doing this for years. In New York, they've only had a Green Amendment for the last year, and they're already showing great success in appropriate interpretation of what a Green Amendment means and how it applies and whether or not government action can withstand a constitutional challenge. There's no reason to believe that the New Mexico justice system is not as competent as and as capable as the justice systems in Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York when it comes to doing this important job of a constitutional assessment. I've alluded to this already, but we hear this false claim that somehow by lifting up environmental rights into the Constitution so that there can be legal challenges of constitutional violations, that somehow we are expecting the judges, the judiciary of New Mexico to displace the legislative arm of the government or even other arms of the government, like the governor's office, right? The executive branch and the regulatory agencies. And that's simply not what we're doing. Again, justices have always had a role in interpreting environmental laws, environmental regulations, environmental permitting. They are very capable. They've always had a role in interpreting the legislation, regulation, permit, and permitting as it applies to other constitutional entitlements, like the right to bear arms and the right to free speech. There is nothing new or different here when it comes to the environment. The New Mexico courts will appropriately use their experience to determine whether or not there has been a constitutional violation. If there has been, they will order the other arms of government to remedy the problem. And for anybody to suggest that environmental protections are too complicated for the justices of the New Mexico judiciary arm to be able to appropriately weigh in, that's just patently absurd, right? We already know that there are a wealth of environmental laws at the state level and at the federal level where the New Mexico judges already have to weigh in on very weighty issues involving, involving science and policy and impacts and all kinds of aspects of society. There's no reason that we would suddenly say, well, they can do it when it comes to this context involving the environment, but somehow they can't do it when it comes to a constitutional entitlement. That's just simply an inappropriate. There's just no way to draw that line. It's just an inappropriate claim. And again, in New York and Pennsylvania and Montana, the judges have proven themselves to be very capable to review and rule upon constitutional environmental rights amendments. They can do it in New Mexico too. Will the state be overwhelmed by frivolous lawsuits? No. 0 frivolous lawsuits dismissed in Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York. That's the long and the short of it. Will there be an overwhelming onslaught of litigation if a New Mexico Green Amendment is passed? Will everything under the sun be challenged on constitutional environmental rights grounds? No. The constitutional bar is a very high bar. Lawyers are not going to leap to a constitutional challenge unless it is fully and fairly appropriate. And what we see in the other 3 Green Amendment states, there are administrative cases that come forth, but the cases that actually make it to the courts, 3 to 9 a year. New York has had its Green Amendment for just a year now, and I think we've seen 3 or 4 lawsuits. Right. So that's not really that many. And I would suggest to you, if there was an onslaught of lawsuits on constitutional environmental rights grounds, then it actually would suggest that there's a really big problem. And it sure is a good thing that we passed a New Mexico Green Amendment to help address these critical issues of weighty concern for the environment and communities of New Mexico. But we don't see an abuse of constitutional environmental rights, just like we don't see an abuse of constitutional free speech rights or freedom of religion rights, right? Lawyers are bound by ethical standards, and so too are judges, and they really hold true to those standards. So when we have seen lawsuits brought forth in those other states, it's because there are serious issues of significant community concern that need a justice to weigh in on. Will this be inviting lawsuits of neighbor against neighbor, the downstream homeowner against the upstream farmer or industrial operator? No. The Green Amendment is about government action, just like other fundamental freedoms. The goal is to ensure that when government governs, whether that's legislation, regulation, issuing permits that allow operations to advance, that government action complies with their constitutional obligation. This is not going to result in lawsuits of neighbor versus neighbor. This is about government obligations. Will the Green Amendment be too costly for the state? No. Better decisions in terms of environmental protections avoid costly harms like flooding and flood damages and the damages from wildfires and droughts, right? Like the human health harms that come from pollution and degradation, the loss of farms and farming due to PFAS contamination. These are all really expensive things for the people of New Mexico individually on a community basis and on a state basis. When we have a New Mexico Green Amendment, we will be avoiding those kinds of costly harms. Again, the amendment is not going to be about monetary payouts to remedy a problem. It's going to be about putting in place solutions that solve the problem, rescinding a law that would result in an unconstitutional violation, voiding out a permit and requiring the government to fix the permit in order to protect environmental rights while they're permitting whatever it is they want to permit. That's the focus here. And of course, we all know that a healthy environment is critical to healthy economic development. That has been shown across history, and it's certainly shown true here in the state of New Mexico, where clean and healthy environments and the beautiful land of enchantment are the base of so many jobs and so much economic prosperity in the state. When we allow the environment to be degraded, we cost, right, all the businesses and operations that depend upon a clean and healthy environment, but actually we impact all businesses, right? If you don't have healthy workers that can go to work, that harms a business. If you have an industrial operator or a pharmaceutical company or a manufacturing company that needs clean water to create their products, if they have contaminated water, they've got to clean it up before they use it. If you've got a farm dependent upon clean water and it's contaminated with PFAS contamination, you devastate the operations of that farm and farming. And we have examples of that happening here in the state of New Mexico, farms and farmers that have been devastated by contamination of the water and the soils and the ecosystem. So we know that environmental prosperity and economic prosperity go hand in hand, and the Green Amendment simply makes sure that we are lifting both up. And I just think that this quote by Senator Pope really puts it all into perspective. When he was asked this question, he said, we can't replace this planet, our land, our water, and we can't replace our people. People are worried about the cost to the state, but no harm, no cost. Cost is the wrong focus. We can't afford the harm. And we have heard most recently some those who claim to be concerned about clean and renewable energy operations here in the state of New Mexico, and concerned that the Green Amendment is somehow going to harm clean energy advancement. We have not seen that. In Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York, we don't see challenges against clean and renewable energy projects. In fact, the memorandum that made this false assertion to legislators cited one Pennsylvania example. And in that example, there was a legal challenge to a clean energy project, and the clean energy project won. So, but we don't, they don't have a mass of examples because they simply aren't there. But the other thing is that the New Mexico Green Amendment language really prioritizes the advancement of truly clean and renewable energy projects. It has as an obligation that government officials ensure their actions and activities seek to protect the rights of all people to a stable climate, that they protect the rights of future generations to clean and healthy environments, which are impacted, right, by the climate crisis and climate instability. So there is actual language in the Green Amendment that helps ensure that this compelling state interest, which is key at language, of New Mexico government officials to protect the climate rights of the people of New Mexico, can be brought to bear to advance clean and renewable energy strategies. And I don't want to say, right, that there are some times when there have been clean energy projects that have been proposed in other places and spaces in the wrong place, like right in the flyway, where some critical bird species might fly right through. Okay, well, maybe then the Green Amendment can be brought to bear, not to stop the project, but to help ensure that it's redesigned so the project can advance in a way that doesn't have that devastating impact. But the New Mexico Green Amendment is about, again, supporting the compelling state interest of addressing the climate crisis. It is going to be value added to clean and renewable energy advancement here in the state of New Mexico. And will it really make a difference? I'm not going to go into the details. That's another training, but we have seen in other states where really devastating laws and permits have been addressed through the Green Amendment, where long ignored toxic sites with spreading pollution plumes have secured cleanup because of the Pennsylvania Green Amendment, where drinking water protections have been put in place because of the government's recognition of their constitutional obligation to protect the rights of the people to clean water and a healthy environment. It makes a powerful and meaningful difference. It's not an instant panacea, but it takes the most powerful tool we have and brings it to bear for the environment. It strengthens legal protections on the books, but it also strengthens advocacy, because now environmental advocates are fighting for people and the earth, but they're also fighting for a constitutional entitlement, and that really changes the playing field. The Green Amendment lifts up environmental protection, environmental justice, climate justice, and generational protection in unparalleled ways that are not accomplished under existing law. So I'm really quick because Bridget's going to touch on this. Just want to highlight that we have a new app. That's a great way to get engaged and be an ongoing part of the conversation. Bridget's going to touch on that. And of course, we have our website, www.nmgreenamendment.org, where you can always go for resources and action items. I'm just going to leave this. There's going to be a follow-up email. I think that I've gone on plenty. You've gotten a lot of information. There's going to be a follow-up email to this webinar that's going to give you critical links to resources and ways to take action. And then, of course, there's the new book, the second edition of the Green Amendment, The People's Fight for a Clean, Safe, and Healthy Environment. And the reason why I put this up is because I really want you to know that New Mexico is a key inspirational focus in the second edition of the book. So there are people all over the nation that are learning about the power and importance of what's happening here in New Mexico when it comes to advancing constitutional environmental rights at this highest Green Amendment level. And so it's just wonderful to be able to share your stories and lift you all up, because you truly are an inspiration to people across the nation and frankly around the world. And I thank you. And with that, I am going to stop the share.
Cuando estás mala.
And we're going to have Q&A at the end so we can get through all the presentations. So in case people have to leave early, at the end of our hour and a half, they can do so, having gotten all the information. And with that, I'm going to turn the podium over to Nicole.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Ilanovich, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm here to talk about personal stories and how we talk to our elected officials while giving public comment. It's super important because these are things that make op-eds. These are things that turn the tides. These are the reasons that we will get yes votes out of our maybes and turn our no's into maybes or yeses. Next slide. So when we're giving public comment, we want to tell personal stories. The stories need to be linear. They should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. When you're speaking, you should talk about clear images, sights, sounds, smells. These things will reveal your motivations and values. Think about filling words. And they should be connected to your struggles and your goals, because that is what will resonate with people. Next slide. So when you're giving public comment, you want to have a root for your reasoning for speaking. You want to exchange stories, whether they're internal or external stories. Share strategies with one another. Ask and create next steps, especially during the legislative session. Respectfully asking folks to vote yes on our bills is the most important step that you can make outside of saying thank you, right? Next slide. So I'm going to give you an example, and I want you to listen and see if you can hear images, if you can understand my reasoning for wanting a green amendment. So Chairman, members of the committee, my name's Nicole Ilanovich, and I'm here asking you to support the green amendment for the generations. I am a disabled veteran who was downwind of burn pits for 12 hours a day in Iraq in 2004. There is no limit on what environmental toxins can do. As a first-time mother of an infant baby, I struggle to hold my own child. This all while living in the South Valley of New Mexico, where my water has higher particulates than I can drink. Well, I get notifications on my phone telling me when the air is breathable outside. All of this while Valencia wants to guzzle up our water, while Yates wants to drill oil. All of these, and all I want to do is be able to live a life with my daughter and continue living out in this disabled body as best as I can to make sure my daughter has the best life possible for her and her children. With that, I humbly ask that you support the Green Amendment. Thank you. Next slide. So in that example, did you hear my values? Could you see images? What do you think my motivation for speaking was? What could be improved? And what was effective about it? When you're creating public comment during this legislative session, it is up to the chair of the committee to decide whether it's a 30-second, 1 minute, or 2-minute public comment. So it is really important that you write out your public comment, say it, make sure you have an abbreviated version of it, and make sure what you're saying has these things. Because some committees have somebody in one committee going to the next committee. I think ours specifically, Senator Duhigg, right? If you say something in this first committee, it might resonate with her in the second committee that we go to. So always keep in mind that you want to leave people thinking about what you've said. Next slide. So what we've been taught when we give public comment, the overarching theme is people will come for all different reasons. There will be so many people in that committee who are there for different bills, who are there for different reasons, who are there to just listen, lobbyists, community members, advocates, and the like, right? But one of the reasons that they'll stay is for you. So while they might not be giving public comment on the Green Amendment, something you might say might impact them so much and resonate with them that they actually might join our coalition and be on our side the next time the Green Amendment is heard. So always remember, they come for all different reasons, but they stay for you. And so next slide. With that, again, I want to thank everybody for participating in this. I am actually in the Bernalillo County Commission getting ready to practice my public comment here, these little whack-a-mole things that are happening in our backyard. And so thank you, everybody, and let's get the Green Amendment passed this year.
That was amazing, Nicole. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time to join us, even though you have that important hearing going on. And with that, I'm going to pass the podium to Eddie. Eddie Estrada.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. My name is Eddie Estrada, and I am an organizer helping out this effort. And I'm here at the southern part of the state, right outside Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I want to go over a few action items that we can all participate in this phase to really draw attention to this issue. And I think that the personal story element is so important when we are engaging with our friends and family and neighbors, because it puts an individual perspective on the Green Amendment. So I want to go over a few items with you. The first is informational flyers that we've finalized and printed, and they are ready to go out to communities all over the state. So I want to give a huge shout out to Maya and the team for printing out. I think it's over 5,000 of these. They're full color, double-sided informational flyers that are going to come pre-cut with a hole on the top so that we can safely leave them on, fences, mailboxes, and doors, because we understand that there are many homes and communities that still have immunocompromised people. And if we learn anything from 2020 was that we need to really be mindful and respect our most vulnerable. And so we want to get these out to communities that need the information. And so we made an online request form, really easy for you to request any number of these informational flyers for you to distribute. So the form looks like this, pretty simple. We just want your first and last name, street address, city, so that we can send it to you. But we also want to know where you plan to distribute the flyer. This is going to help us keep track of what areas around the state are getting the information and where we need to strategize on how to get them out in case that, we're really having a gap in certain areas around the state. So I'm going to drop in the chat the link for this. And I just sent that so you guys can order your flyers. Again, they start in denominations of 25. They go all the way up to 500. But if you need more, just put in the additional comment section how many you need exactly, and we'll make sure to get that to you. The second thing that we're requesting of the community is to help us do some power mapping. So what power mapping will allow us to do is to really visualize the key allies that we have or don't have in this movement. So what power mapping is going to help us do is affect the change in our community by identifying those with the most power. And I know that many of you on this call are already engaged with key legislators and influential people in the state. And we need that information to develop our targeted strategy plan. So this form is online, and this one's a little more extensive, but what we are requesting from the community is, identify what government office that they are serving in, the title of the individual, the date of the meeting where you contacted this person or maybe overheard in a Zoom call their stance on the issue, and how you receive the information, and their position on the Green Amendment. Some people are strong supporters and they vocally say that, and some are still not sure. And the more information that we can crowdsource from the community, the better equipped we will be to develop the next phases of our action plan. Let me share with you this link in the chat as well before I move on. Oh, you send it, Maya? Thanks. All right. And last but not least, this is where the personal story I think is going to be most impactful. We're requesting that all of our advocates start writing letters to the editor. So why do we think that this is going to be an effective strategy? Because letters to the editor are amongst the most widely read features in any newspaper. They allow us to reach a larger audience, and we get to benefit off of the audience that publication already has. In a world of sponsored ads and paid media this is a breath of fresh air because it's completely free, and it really helps influence public opinion and educate the general public on this matter, because many of them may not be as well aware of what it is that the Green Amendment is and why it impacts them. We also know that many policymakers and elected officials are subscribed to the major newspaper publications, and they're watching. And if we do get our letters published, it really makes them realize how powerful that the Green Amendment is and how much it's resonating with their constituents. So there's another tool that is on our website that makes it super easy to get a letter to the editor published. It is, I don't have that link ready, but it is right there on the title. It's nmgreenamendment.org/actnow/letter to the editor. And I love this tool because it really just asks you for your name, your email, and your address. And what it's going to do is it's going to find any publications within 75 miles of your location, and it will automatically send your letter to the 5 closest newspapers. So when I put my address in this form, it found the El Paso Times, Las Cruces Sun, and the Las Cruces Bulletin. And that's for me down here. And the benefit of using this form is that right under the search box where it gives me my publications, it gives us like over 20 talking points that you can address as a starting point for your letter to the editor. So we have all of the key information that you need to be armed to write a very impactful letter right there at your fingertips. Some tips. We know that if you submit a letter to the editor, it's not guaranteed to get published, but understand that you can submit one and write one at any time you want so you can shape public opinion. You can write one tonight. You can do it again next week. You can do it again next month. But the key here is to do it and wait a little while to see if it does get published. If not, try another publication and try it again. The larger the newspaper, I know some of you guys are up there in Santa Fe and Albuquerque. I know it's really competitive to get letters to get published within that space. So that means your letter is going to need to stand out in order to get printed. So make your opening sentence like super captivating. Think about the language in that first few sentences, and then explain the issue simply and use plain language that most readers are going to be able to understand. And again, use your personal story. This is really important to that it comes from the heart, comes from the community, because these issues, if they're impactful to you, they're impactful to your neighbors and the bigger community. And we're finding that the best way to get letters published is by sending it via email. It's very easy for the newspapers now to just copy and paste it over. Before, I know you were able to send over a handwritten letter, but that takes a lot of time for somebody to receive it, read it, type it out into their software. And we're finding that that's easier to get ignored if you're sending in handwritten letters. So just send it via email. That's the best way. That's all I have for now. I'm going to hand it over to Bridget to go over some exciting new programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. Let me just pull up my PowerPoint really quickly. My name is Bridget Brady, and I am the Communications and Advocacy Coordinator with Green Amendments for the Generations. I've been working here in New Mexico for the past few years, and like all of you, I'm super excited and super hopeful for this 2023 legislative session. I'm just going to quickly share yet another tool for you to help stay engaged in this New Mexico Green Amendment movement, as well as some resources that we have available to help anyone who needs to be able to do that. So the first is our Green Amendment white label app. It's very exciting. The Green Amendment now has its own app, right? So this is created by a developer that had called Powered by Action, that had the vision to sort of bring together all the functionalities and capabilities that we use and things like Facebook and Google Groups and Twitter and Slack and all of those sorts of different things into one place, centered around like a single topic issue. So in this case, we have our own Green Amendment app centered around just the Green Amendment that provides all those capabilities in one place. So it's a one-stop shop for you to be able to stay up to date on hot news and action opportunities, to share your own ideas and intel, to access our toolkits, resources, and information, all sorts of informational guides. There are a couple ways to access it, and you can do either or both, like I do. The first one is you can access it right on your computer through your internet browser, and there's a bit.ly link there on the screen. Like Maya and Eddie have said, all of these links are going to go out in the follow-up email, so don't worry about trying to write them down quickly right now. But yeah, so that you can join through your computer. You can also join through your smartphone. The app is available in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. So there's links there, but also if you open up whatever your app store is that you use and you search Green Amendment, you should be able to find it right away, download it, and then sign up. It's super easy to do. I just wanted to give you a quick idea of what the interface looks like and what to expect. So this app is a Green Amendment tool that we use nationwide, right? So there are communities for each state that we're actively working in, and you want to be sure to sign up for the New Mexico community specifically. The link that we're sharing, once you sign up, should take you directly there. If it doesn't, you can go over to this on the left tab, this communities button, and if you click that, you'll see all the different states we're working in, and you can select the New Mexico Green Amendment movement. And then you want to select join over on the top right. You can see I'm already joined. And then just to like give you an idea of what to find here. So you have these different tabs across the top. This first one is news. It's kind of like a Facebook page stream, right? So there's posts. If I actually had the website up, I could scroll down and show you all the different posts that have been happening, and we'll expect these to be more and more frequent as the session goes on. There are also some pinned posts at the top that are more evergreen. One of them I'm going to be touching on momentarily. There's a tab for events, and you can also see events over here on the right side. So you see tonight's event. Also, we expect this to become more and more populated in the coming weeks and months. You can see the members. Files is an important one, right? So we have a lot of resources here, and also expect as needed, there will be additional resources added to that. Also an about section, and then just a couple other things to note. If you are interested in, in the community section, when you click there, there's a community for each state. There's also a general national Green Amendments for the Generations community. So if you're interested in things that are sort of applicable across the board, and you want to dig deeper into the Green Amendment and what's happening across the country, then you can join that more general community as well. And then the last thing, sorry, I've got to move my screen around, is if you do sign up and you find yourself getting inundated with emails or push notifications on your phone, you can go to this little bell icon here on the top right. And if you click that, it'll bring up a box with a bunch of checkbox options, and you can check or uncheck whatever amount of notifications you want to get. So those are just some helpful tips that we've learned as we've started to roll this out and use it, but it's a really nice place to just have everything in one place. So please, sign up at the link, join it. It's really, really handy. And then the next thing I wanted to discuss that I believe Eddie might have touched on briefly is the announcement of our Green Amendment mini grant program. So this is a program designed to support smaller grassroots organizations or individuals to participate in educational advocacy, any sort of engagement really having to do with the New Mexico Green Amendment New Mexico Green Amendment efforts. And grants will be allotted up to $500 to cover expenses from, everything from traveling to participate in a hearing or a meeting, speaker honoraria if you're speaking at an event or you're testifying, material for printing or printing costs, technology if you need to buy some sort of technology to access something having to do with the Green Amendment movement in New Mexico, lost wages if you do incur lost wages to engage in something in support of the New Mexico Green Amendment, even expert or legal fees and more. I mean, it's really it's very open-ended to a certain degree and just meant to be able to support people to be able to engage. And so I have some links at the bottom that we'll also be sharing. One is through the app directly. Like I mentioned, there's a pinned post at the top of the news feed. And then below that is if you don't have the app, there's a direct link to get all of the information on eligibility and the application. And it's really designed to be very accessible and streamlined and easy to do. So it's just a Google form where you fill out what you want to do, what you need funds for. Really simple and straightforward. Reporting likewise is basically submitting a paragraph on what you use the funds for through a Google form. So it's really meant to be low, bar of access, low hurdle. Really just want to be able to help people to be able to engage. And just I guess a side note on that too is that if there is, extenuating circumstances, we would do grants up to $1,500, but generally around $500 range. And we would prefer to pay them as they come. So if you can anticipate costs and fill out the form ahead of time and we can pay them directly, that's best, but we can also reimburse if you have costs down the line. So I think that's it, unless I missed anything, Maya, on the app or the mini grants.
No. Okay, so that concludes our formal informational presentation. And so with that, we're really going to open it up to questions. You can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand and ask a question. We would ask people to ask questions versus sharing too much additional information, right? So that we can get through as many questions as possible. And while people are pondering and asking their questions, one of the overarching questions we have is we would like to know how frequently having sessions like this would be helpful. Last year, we actually were doing them weekly for a while. And if having weekly or bi-weekly Zooms on a regular basis where people can come for the hottest information, updates, ask questions, engage in conversation, it would be nice to know the frequency that people think might be of value. So you could just pop that number in the chat while people are pondering their questions. But if you have a question and you want to raise your hands, we would love to answer it. And I see the senator has kindly and generously stuck with us. So please, if you have a question for the senator, she's a wealth of knowledge. Terry, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. That's fantastic. Senator, can the Green Amendment legally precede the Nuclear Regulatory Commission?
Well, okay, this is, God, forgive me if this is crazy, sound crazy. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission preempts all things involving nuclear safety. Okay, so if a state, and Texas and California have both successfully done this, if the state has a permitting process that doesn't focus on safety, nuclear safety, but focuses on other land use issues, economic issues, environmental justice issues, the state has power to do that because it's one of the things that the Nuclear Energy Regulatory Commission and the regulations passed under it doesn't preempt. So what this does is it sets up a value of the state that is not focused on nuclear safety, but focused on the other values we hold dear in New Mexico, a very, very strong policy. Now, I can't guarantee that a federal court will say Green Amendment trumps all. But what I can say is that it will be another tool, because you know it's going to be litigated. Whatever we pass is going to be litigated. And this is going to be another thing that the judges can look to see whether New Mexico is trying to displace what the Nuclear Energy Regulatory Commission can do, or whether it has its own separate values. And so that's how I think that it can be used. I'm not saying it's a trump card. I'm saying it's another tool.
And I think just to offer some additional information on that, because this question has also come up with regards to PFAS and the military bases, right? And it's come up with regards to pipelines, fracked gas pipelines, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And I think the best way to think about how the Green Amendment would apply in any of these circumstances, or may apply, is the New Mexico Constitution applies to state action. And so if there is a state action or decision to be taken, then that will affect the environment and that issue, then the amendment may be brought to bear on that state action. It cannot be brought to bear to force federal government action. So just think about in the Holtec situation, that there might be local government or state government decision-making, right? Senator Steinborn has been proposing legislation for at least a year now, if not two, to try 3 years to try to ensure some empowerment for the state with regards to Holtec. If that kind of legislation were to pass, the Green Amendment could be brought to bear, but it's not going to be able to tell the NRC or FERC or the Department of Defense how they can, or the EPA, how they can or should behave. It applies to the state action. And that is one reason why we ultimately need a federal Green Amendment, because that is what we will be able to use against federal government action. As we all know, we're waiting for the right tipping point before actively engaging in pursuing a federal Green Amendment. Right now, we just wouldn't get there. States are the place to put our energy and our focus now, because we can get near-term passage and empowerment and protection in the near term, but we will ultimately be adding a federal amendment to the palette of work, and hope that after we get our New Mexico Green Amendment, you'll all be part of that movement too.
Great. Because I'm thinking too, and that sounds like it's possibly favorable for the state of New Mexico, because I know the governor is against Holtec. I know the city of Albuquerque is against Holtec. I think maybe telling them about this approach of what the Green Amendment could do could get the governor on board for this, is my feeling. So maybe a strategy we might want to think about in the long run. But thank you, Antoinette, for being our champion again this year. You're great at it, and I love it. And of course, Maya, you're always the best. So thank you very much.
Carrie, thank you. And I want to share with you, the governor hasn't expressed any kind of opposition to this. It's just that she doesn't have a role. And so if we pass it, it goes directly to the voters. So she doesn't sign it. So she doesn't tend, what I've learned from her staff is she doesn't tend to get involved in things that she doesn't have any control or power over. And so this, she hasn't, there was an unfortunate kind of pitting this against, I don't know, we'll see, but she has not been negative about this. And some of her staff are very, very supportive, but they don't get involved in things that she doesn't have power or control over.
Okay, but I still think though her public support for it might help. Is what I'm thinking.
Agree. I totally agree.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Antoinette.
And remember, the other thing you could share with her is this would protect her environmental legacy.
Right.
Because
EPA,
every regulation that she's passed, if God forbid we got a governor like Martinez who tried to undo them, like she did Richardson's,
right.
They'd have to look at the impact on the air, land, and water at each stage of trying to undo them. So this is protecting the governor's legacy, and I think that's another powerful reason she should support it.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
And just note, when we have other sessions, right, we'll focus on things like what we might do with regards to the governor or the attorney general, right? Or, social media strategy, all those good things, but we didn't want to overload you too much tonight. Do we have any other questions? Raised hands in the box or on the screen? No? Okay, well, we really, really appreciate you joining us. All the links will be sent. Eddie's already put together a powerful toolkit that's going to be emailed right out. So you all can have links. And when this presentation is finalized, we will put it on the website.
I saw a question on the comment that I hadn't seen, that we didn't answer. And that was the committees, what'll happen. So the reason we have two, one in the House and one in the Senate, is if it gets blocked on the way somewhere, like let's say we can't get a hearing in Judiciary in the House or the Senate, the other one will go forward. And whichever one goes over to the other side first is the one we'll stick with. And the question is whether they get 2 additional hearings. Normally, you only get 1 hearing after you cross the other side. And so that's the plan, if that makes sense. If that's not clear, let me know. But the question was, will they have to go through 2 hearings? Well, both of them have to go through. Only one of them has to pass. And we have 2 just for strategy, but really only one of them has to pass.
Oh, and now you've reminded me to scroll through the chat. So thanks for that. Joan asked us to reiterate the bill numbers. It's HJR 4 on the House side and SJR 6 on the Senate side. Let's just see if there are any other questions that have yet to be addressed.
There's Margaret Bell has her hand up.
Margaret? Go
Yes,
for it.
thank you. I'm the one who put the question in about the committees.
Okay.
And my question was, because I was thinking about the 2 judiciary committees as well, because I know how tough they are. I guess I was hoping the House Judiciary might be a little easier than the Senate Judiciary. And so my question was, if the House Joint Resolution moves more quickly and gets through its 2 committees, goes to the Senate, would it have to go through Senate Judiciary as well, or could that be avoided?
It'll go to wherever Peter Worth assigns it. I
Okay.
would be very surprised if he didn't send it to Judiciary.
Is there a way to sort of lobby him against that in some way, to push him toward rules instead of toward judiciary?
You could tell him, you could definitely say that would be a good idea.
Okay. And do you think the Rules Committee is a little friendlier than the Judiciary Committee?
It was in the past. We got past rules last time handily. It
Okay.
has changed a little bit, but I don't think it's changed in a negative way at all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other, I'm sorry, looking for hands and chats. Okay, all right.
Great
So,
question, Margaret. Great questions, everyone. Thank you.
so thank you everybody for joining us. I think based on the feedback and some text messages, we're probably going to plan to have another training and Q&A and sort of update probably in about 2-week time. So pay attention, look out for that. And there are other trainings that other organizations have in the works. I think Retake Democracy is planning one. Sierra Club recently had a training. So there are lots of great people who are engaged in organizations engaged around this. And if your organization's having a training or event, let us know so we can help publicize it. We want to lift up your organization and your great works on this issue as well.
Oh, Maya, quick question. Will we
Sure.
get an update on the app on when these bills go to committees?
Yeah, so basically what is happening with the app, and one of the reasons why we're really encouraging people to join that is right now, if there's an update or new information, it requires I'll talk to you about that later, Senator. It requires me to literally do a Google group email and then emails to hundreds of people, 50 at a time. And so that's a long and arduous process, but if people are on the app, then, you know, that's the first place I post, and you'll, depending on your settings, the app will give you an immediate alert if there's some hot news. So that's probably going to be your best first place to get immediate notification. And then my goal is to really have enough people on the app. As Bridget said, it's brand new, so people are just onboarding now. But my goal is that we have enough people on there that we can really make that. We used to try to make the one-stop shop, but we really would like the app to be, because the app is also a way that there can be two-way conversation. It's not just me pushing out information, it's Terry, like, you pushing out information, and Eddie and Margaret and Joan and, Luis.
And
from-
I'm on, I got on.
and the senator is on. I thought you were showing me something else. And the senator.
No,
is on.
it's on, it's on.
Yeah. So, that is really like, as soon as the senator indicated that the Senate assignments were done, it was on the app, so that is the goal, that will be your best first place for information securing, but also sharing. So anything else? Great. Well, you all are awesome, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to inform, engage, inspire around a New Mexico Green Amendment, because this is transformational. And again, whenever I speak about the Green Amendment movement and this concept anywhere across the nation, I lift up what's happening in New Mexico. You all are truly inspirational. I honor you and I thank you. And really, people around the nation are watching what you're doing and being inspired. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.